Assalamu alaikum everyone. Welcome to our virtual Open Iftar 2021 and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Farah and I will be your host for this evening. We have an absolutely exciting event planned for this evening with speakers from the Faith and Belief Forum. And before we get started, I want to first thank our media partner for this year, Islam Channel, and to give a special welcome to those joining us from Islam Channel's Facebook and YouTube. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you with us. And if you are watching from Facebook and YouTube, we'd be really happy for you to join in, to jump on the Zoom at RamadanTentProject.com, join in the conversation, post your comments, post your questions. It'll be great to hear from you. I also especially want to thank the Arts Council UK, whose help has allowed us to continue our work this Ramadan, all of which is available on our website, and our work this Ramadan is supported by Islamic Relief, our charity partner. And you can check out the incredible work that Islamic Relief does at iruk.co/RTP. Our virtual open iftars are interactive, so I'd like to, as I said, jump on the Zoom, and for those who are comfortable, turn on your cameras. It'll be lovely to see some happy smiley faces this evening. And a quick run through of the tech for those who are unfamiliar. At the bottom of your screens or in the More section on your mobile, there's a reactions option, and you can show us how you're feeling in real time. There's also a raise hand option as well if you want our speakers to, if you want to interact with our speakers. So let us know, and we will unmute you. So, use a chat box. We love to hear from you, love to hear from where you're calling from. It's always exciting to hear where everyone's calling from and the diverse number of people who join us every day. And keep posting in the chat box. So first of all, oh wow, we've got a full house today. It's absolutely fantastic. Keep joining. So I'm going to start off by asking somebody new, no, we've got somebody who wants to be unmuted. Iman, could you arrange that as well, please? Hello, is that Eunice?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Eunice, how are you?
Oh, Alhamdulillah, not too bad. How are you, everyone?
Good, alhamdulillah. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
How's your Ramadan going? Is it your first time?
No, it's actually, I did it last year as well, Farah, to be funnily enough. And this year I've smashed it.
Fantastic. So Ramadan's going.
Thank you very much.
Oh, that's really good.
Splendid.
Thank you for joining us. I also have
Thank you very much.
Olive in the audience. Olive, can we say hello to you? Olive is calling from Cornwall. So if we can get Olive on, that'll be absolutely fantastic. It'll be lovely to hear from everyone who's calling from different parts of the country. Hi, Olive. We're just going to see if we can have a chat with you. How are you?
Yes, I'm fine, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
It's good to be here.
What's made you jump on today? We'd love to hear, how
right.
Well,
no, I just an interest in wanting to know what you're doing, and just to see. That's all. Just curiosity.
Fantastic. Well, it's going to be a fantastic event. We're talking about faith in no faith spaces, so we're really looking forward to this event. And we have someone from Chile. Lovely. If we can get Cesar on from Chile. Hi, Cesar.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Yes. I'm so fine, thanks. I'm so excited to be here with you and listen this speech.
We're really excited to have you. It's fantastic to have people joining us from all over. So thank you for taking the time to join us today. So and let's go to Raheem. Hi, Raheem. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I can't believe Ramadan is flown by.
It has gone, yeah.
Now. How's your Ramadan been?
It's been good. It's been, like you say, it's gone so quickly, and I think I'm very sad. It's almost over, but we still have a week left, so try and make the most of it, I suppose.
I absolutely agree with you. Not long left, and just got to push out all the stops for the last, depending 7 or 8 days, depending on who started when. And Raheem, what's for iftar tonight? Because we love talking about food on Ramadan Tent Project. What are you having tonight for iftar?
I should be eating some healthy food, but my mum brought cake home, and I just feel like being a little bit unhealthy today and treating myself. So if I probably won't be able to eat more than one slice. That's probably as much as I'll get before I'm absolutely full.
Cake is always good. I mean, like we discussed it on here, we had showcase on as well. Everything in moderation. A bit of cake in Ramadan would do you good. Iman always has interesting. Iman, and I always talk about what we're having for iftar. Iman, what's on your menu today?
Hi, yeah, I think you will actually find this interesting. I'm planning to make this bread pudding. It's an Egyptian bread pudding called Ali.
Oh, my favorite.
Oh, you've had it before?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's surprisingly very simple and tastes so rich and good, and I've been craving it all day, so I decided today I'm making it for iftar. So yeah, that's on the menu. Well, probably means I won't be eating anything after that because it's very unhealthy.
Well, as long as it sustains you and keeps you going. I was craving a cup of tea all day yesterday, and then I finally had my cup of tea, and then realized my milk had gone bad.
Oh no.
How sad is that when you've been craving a cup of tea all day? And it was fine in the morning when I had my cereal, and then by the time it got to 8 p.m. So the first thing I did this morning was, go and get my milk so I can have a cup of tea today.
Well, good luck. Get that good cup.
So as for dinner, my sister's sorting out dinner today. So
okay, that's good.
It's good. So it's just like, what do you want? I said, I'm easy. You can decide today. So I'm sure it'll be quite delicious. So it's over to her. You're gonna have to send me that recipe for Omani.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And Jonathan, smiling. Jonathan, I know you're gonna be talking to us later, but what have you had dinner? What's for dinner tonight? What's your iftar tonight?
We had mango red pepper curry tonight that my wife made.
Ooh, that sounds
was great.
Good. Oh wow. Are you having any pudding?
I don't know. We'll have to see what comes later. Well, I have a very sweet tooth, so possibly.
That's always a little bit of pudding is always a good idea. So I'm conscious of the time. It's 7:43. So what I'm going to do is just give for those joining us today. So we've got lots of new faces. A little overview of the Faith and Belief Forum, and then following that, I'll introduce you to our first speaker today, who's going to be Rachel Cohn. So the Faith and Belief Forum works towards a connected and supportive society where people of different faiths, beliefs, and cultures have a strong, productive, and lasting relationship. They were founded in 1997 as the Three Faiths Forum, and became the Faith and Belief Forum in 2018. They create spaces in schools and universities and the wider community where people can engage with questions of belief and identity and meet people different from themselves. Their programs also enable people from different backgrounds, both religious and non-religious, to learn from each other and work together. Today's topic is going to be about faith in no faith spaces. We're going to start off with Rachel. So each of our speakers will be having Rachel and Jonathan and James join us today. So a quick intro to Rachel. Rachel is an educator and dialogue facilitator from Toronto, Canada, where she grew up deeply embedded in the Jewish community. Rachel holds a BA in Peace, Conflict and Justice Studies from the University of Toronto and an MSc Conflict Studies from the London School of Economics and Political Science. The focus of her academic and practical work has been using dialogue to advance intercommunal reconciliation. And Rachel has been involved in multiple peace-building initiatives between Israelis and Palestinians, as well as Jews and Muslims. Rachel now lives in London and works on Parliamenters, which is an interfaith political leadership program, and is a proud member of the Faith and Belief Forum. So over to you, Rachel.
Thank you so much, Farah. Good evening, everyone, and Ramadan Mubarak. I'm so happy to be here with you tonight, so thank you very much for having me. As was said, my name is Rachel and I work at the Faith and Belief Forum. So I'll just go a bit more into detail about what we do at the Faith and Belief Forum, and then I'll be very happy to pass on to our wonderful speakers, Jonathan and Zayn. So the Faith and Belief Forum, as was said, was founded in 1997 by 3 faith leaders, a Christian, a Muslim, and a Jew. And now we work every year with over 20,000 people in schools, universities, local communities, and workplaces, bringing people together who would not normally meet and giving them the opportunity to learn from one another through dialogue instead of debate. So I'll just go into a bit of detail about what we do in schools, universities, and in local communities. So one of our main programs is school linking. And through school linking, we bring to, both primary and secondary students from different cultural or faith backgrounds to together explore issues of identity, community, and belief. Another thing that we do in schools is run workshops. And one of our workshops is called Encountering Faith and Beliefs. And actually, the stories that you're going to hear later today from Jonathan and Zayn are adapted stories that they usually tell in these Encountering Faith and Belief workshops. So through these workshops, we have volunteer speakers who come from a diversity of faith and belief backgrounds. They go into schools, share their personal stories, and then students have the opportunity to have dialogue with them and ask them questions about why they believe, what they believe, and why they believe that. So these workshops really go beyond stereotypes and generalizations and hone in on the personal stories that our speakers have to tell. We've also recently created an online resource that is a collection of these stories, and it's designed for students in key stages 2 and 3, and it's available on our website. And now on to the work that we do in universities. So since 2007, we've been running a UN award-winning program called Parliamentors. So Parliamentors takes place in 9 universities all around the country, and takes 5 students from each university who come from a diversity of backgrounds and matches them up with an MP who mentors them throughout the year as they collaborate on a social action project. So they're inspired to make local change in their communities while being mentored by an MP. And this has been going on for a long time, and the alumni of the program have gone on to do really incredible work. And then last but not least, our community work. So our community work goes right to the heart of faith communities. We hold annual awards that shine a light on local heroes that are doing inspirational work. And we have also recently completed a series of community dialogue projects in London and the West Midlands. So in the midst of the pandemic, we brought faith communities that live side by side, but who don't often interact even in normal times. And we set up dialogue sessions where they could get to know each other, get to know each other's beliefs, and also to discuss the different experiences they have living in the same exact local area. So that was a really incredible project that actually we just wrapped up. So that's just a little taste of what we do at the Faith and Belief Forum. I'm really excited to hand over to Jonathan next. I just first want to set a safe space and to say a brief word about how we tend to go about our work and make sure that everyone can have a positive experience where we talk about challenging topics in a sort of sensitive way. So the first thing, I would just like to encourage a spirit of curiosity, openness, and respect. So of course, this session is really just about trying to understand our speakers, their beliefs, and their stories. So please try to bear this in mind when later on you have an opportunity to ask them questions. And the second thing is to just remember that our speakers are only really representing themselves. They're not ambassadors or representatives of their faith communities. So they will try to answer your questions to the best of their ability, but they may or may not be experts on every single aspect of holy text or a certain practice. So just that's another thing, please, to bear in mind when you're asking questions later. So that's all for me. Thank you again so much for having us. My colleague is going to put our social media handles in the chat, and we would love for you to get involved with our work at the Faith and Belief Forum. Thanks again for listening, and I will now hand off to Jonathan, who's going to tell you his story.
Thank you so much, Rachel, for giving us that overview of the incredible work that you do. And you can check out the links in the Zoom in the chat and how to connect with the Faith and Belief Forum. And before we go over to Jonathan, I'm going to give you a brief introduction about who Jonathan is. So Jonathan Mace is a school speaker from the Faith and Beliefs Forum's Encountering Faith and Beliefs program. Straight after his A-levels, Jonathan spent 2 years as a missionary in Chile for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and he picked up an incredible amount of Spanish along the way as well. And Jonathan has completed a BSc in Business Management from the University of Birmingham. Jonathan also has a postgraduate certificate in Arts Fundraising and Leadership from the University of Leeds. He is currently working as a chartered accountant at Grant Thornton, pivoting his career after 3 years as a theatre fundraiser at the Royal Shakespeare Company and later Hampstead Theatre. Jonathan also has a postgraduate certificate in this arts fundraising, and he's also heavily involved in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in a voluntary capacity, and currently has responsibilities that support families in his local congregation. And so thank you so much, Jonathan. Over to you.
Great, thank you so much, Farah. So yeah, as Farah said, my name is Jonathan Mace, and I am a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So that means I'm a Christian, I'm a follower of Jesus Christ, and I believe the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is led directly by Jesus Christ and is a restoration of the same church that he established when he was physically on the earth. There are over 16.5 million members of the church around the world, with 188,000 of them in the UK attending 320 congregations. So just like Christ called apostles, you might have heard of Peter, James, and John, I believe in living prophets today and apostles who communicate with Jesus Christ, and then they share his messages with the world and with the church. And I also believe in ancient prophets such as Noah, Moses, Abraham, etc., many of whom are shared across multiple faiths. And I believe the words that they wrote in the Bible to be the word of God, as far as it has been translated correctly. I also believe in a book of scripture called the Book of Mormon, which was written by ancient prophets in the Americas between 600 BC and 400 AD. I believe that a prophet called Joseph Smith was guided to this record in the 1820s and translated it into English by the power of God. I therefore believe that the Book of Mormon is more words of God which we can follow to find true happiness. You might have heard members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints referred to as Mormons, the name of the prophet compiler of the Book of Mormon. It's not a term that we actively use anymore, preferring to emphasize the name of Jesus Christ in the name of the church, rather than following one particular prophet. Ultimately, I believe Christ's teachings and those of ancient and modern prophets are there to guide us on a path to go back and live with our Heavenly Father in everlasting joy with our families. So how did I acquire these beliefs? Well, I was raised in a home where both of my parents were of this same faith, and so I was taught doctrine and principles from a young age. In order to achieve this goal of eternal families living together in joy and happiness, I was taught codes of conduct which helped me to obey what I believe are God's commandments. These include key beliefs like the law of tithing. So that means giving 10% of all of my income to God and the church. The word of wisdom, meaning to live a healthy lifestyle and that includes avoiding alcohol, cigarettes, drugs, and tea and coffee. And also the law of chastity, meaning having no sexual relationships before marriage. Growing up, I readily accepted the doctrine, principles, and behavioral norms of my religion and found that they actually really made me happy, rather than being unnecessary restrictions in my life. For example, if I wasn't drinking in my teenage years and later in my university years, I found that it didn't mean that I didn't hang out with my friends or go to parties, but I would avoid the negative effects of alcohol in my life. And I definitely saved some money doing so. The church encourages everyone to question what we believe through study and prayer and to find out for yourself whether the doctrines are true. So at the age of 15, I went to a week-long youth camp, and there I was given the direct invitation to pray to God to know whether what we were being taught was true. I remember going to my room and reading a portion of the Book of Mormon, and then kneeling in prayer, asking whether the book was indeed of God and the doctrines in it true principles. I stayed on my knees for a while after that prayer, hoping for some kind of response from God. And I remember receiving words in my mind as an impression, "You already know." And I felt a real peace. I did already believe that it was true. And I believed that that impression at that time came to me through God's messenger, the Holy Ghost. In times later in my life, when I've had questions about a particular point of doctrine, I think back to that experience. And I knew then, and I know now that what I've been taught is good and true. So in our church, we place emphasis on sharing the joy and truth we feel with everybody. And as such, it's seen as a duty for boys to go on a mission, and it's also strongly encouraged for girls. A mission is an 18-month to 2-year time period where you put your life on hold and you go and share the gospel and serve people in a location anywhere around the world that's assigned to you by prophets and apostles. There are about 54,000 full-time missionaries in the world right now. So when I finished high school, I was 18 and I decided I wanted to serve a mission. I filled in various forms and I sent them off to church headquarters, and a few weeks later, I received a letter assigning me to serve in Chile. My good friend Cesar is on the call today. I received 2 months of language and teaching training in America, and then I went to a mission in Viña del Mar, Chile, which included around 200 other missionaries. Before I went on my mission, I believed what I had been taught was true, but my faith was greatly strengthened during my 2 years of service as I shared my faith with others and invited them to follow the teachings of Jesus Christ. So moving on to how I live my religion in secular spaces, when I returned from my mission, there was a difficult period of adjustment back to normal life. For 2 years, I'd focused on teaching the gospel and living my religion as best as I could, with very few other cares and largely surrounded by missionaries of my own faith. When I came home, I had to start thinking about work and study and interacting with my family and friends, and it took me a while to settle back in. I learned then how to live what I believed, but in the context of normal everyday life. I began my post-mission life by studying a business management degree at the University of Birmingham, as has been mentioned, after which I began working at the Royal Shakespeare Company as a fundraiser and later at Hampstead Theatre. Amongst theatre professionals, I found that I was in a minority in having strong religious beliefs. I would regularly get questions on my views on the Book of Mormon musical, and I used this as an opportunity to share my faith, feeling that in general these questions were coming from a place of real, genuine curiosity. At one time, a theatre that I was working for was considering putting on a play with Jesus as a central character alongside his disciples. I was encouraged to read the script, and having done so, I felt uncomfortable about the material and how it portrayed scriptural figures that I revere. My boss was incredibly supportive and assured me that I would not be asked to work on events or other interaction points around the play, which I was so grateful for. When it was decided ultimately not to produce the show, I was again really grateful, but I know that my colleagues would have been just as respectful if the play had been staged. In my current profession, I'm a trainee chartered accountant, and I find that expressing my faith has brought respect and sincere questions. My firm is clear that faith is a key part of our diversity and inclusion initiatives, and I'm scheduled to give a firm-wide talk on my faith later in the year. The skills and experiences I've developed due to my faith have also been recognised when I've applied for internal positions. In a recent interview, the interviewer picked up on my mission experience on my CV, and it was clear to them how the experiences and skills that I gained in a religious context, like being able to manage my time, set goals, speak a foreign language, would be highly valuable in the workplace. So to conclude, my faith journey has taught me some very important lessons. A key one is that it's a beautiful thing to continue with the faith that I was taught as a child into my adult life. Not everybody has to make a change to their beliefs when they're older. But with that said, I don't believe that we should follow a religion purely because we're told to do so. I firmly believe that everyone is entitled to the opportunity to learn about their religion and other religions and events such as this for themselves, and no one should be deprived the opportunity of visiting and learning from places of worship, which might not be of their own faith, sect, or denomination. I also believe that there's a strength in being true to ourselves and sharing our faith in workplaces and other secular places. I believe that exploration and sincere questioning can lead us to confirm our long-held beliefs or perhaps find new ones in which we can ultimately have a real sense of belonging and joy.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us, Jonathan. And we look forward to interacting with you and everyone else who's on the chat. Do get involved, post any comments you have for Jonathan in the chat box, so then we can interact and we can question later. Yeah, I mean, I've written down so many wonderful things about what you said, and I've already got lots of questions for you. So we're going to move on to Zayn, and before we move on to Zayn Hussein, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Zayn. Now, Zayn is a graduate of the Faith and Belief Forum's UN award-winning Parliamentals program, which gives university students the opportunity to work on social action projects and develop leadership skills under the mentorship of a member of parliament. He has previously worked as a Quaker peace and social witness worker placed with a nuclear disarmament think tank. Zayn currently works for an environmental, social and government rating agency as a specialized research analyst focusing on controversial weapons reduction. Zayn has a BA in Arabic and Hebrew, an MSc in international politics, and is also active in interfaith dialogue, teaching Hebrew at a Jewish Sunday school and organizing interfaith student exchanges between the synagogue and a mosque. Zayn, we're absolutely excited to hear from you, and over to you.
Okay, great. I can unmute. Thank you for having me to speak today at this Open Iftar, and thank you, Jonathan, for an amazing talk about your faith journey. So like a lot of people here, I am a UK-born Muslim who has dealt with the experiences and challenges that come with growing up in the UK as a Muslim. I was born and raised in a somewhat conservative Sufi Sunni Muslim family, and interfaith dialogue was something I had been seeing and experiencing in some form or another for a long time as I was growing up, particularly given the post-9/11 context I was being raised in. I studied Arabic and Hebrew at university, which opened the doors for more interfaith interests and activities. It also made me more aware of issues I did not concern myself with as much before, but were nevertheless discussed within Muslim spaces. My first 2 years in university were a time where I put everything up to question, including matters relating to faith and political ideas I had taken for granted until that age. My time in Jerusalem studying for my year abroad was very formative for me, in that it gave me a greater understanding of how structural racism works. In addition to very active and violent forms of racism against Palestinians, for example, it made me aware of how projects supposedly aimed at peacemaking can often mask oppressive practices and marginalization, and can obscure asymmetric or unequal relations between different people and communities. While life in the UK at home was very, very different, I couldn't help but see some parallels in terms of Islamophobia and racism, and how a lot of interfaith and community cohesion initiatives, which really gained momentum after 9/11, were often more centered around the development of performative citizenship, showing you're a good citizen, rather than true solidarity among different people to deal with real structural and social problems, and even the structural factors, for example, affecting radicalization and extremism. After my year abroad, I started teaching Hebrew at a Jewish Sunday school in a synagogue, something which I continue to do now. I became much more interested in interfaith dialogue between Jews and Muslims and questions of structural forms of racism and Islamophobia, and the different ways in which anti-Semitism manifests itself today. I was asked to share some of my thoughts regarding faith in public space. The experiences that I have shared with you started to make me think about how to reconceive for myself what my relationship as a Muslim should be to public spaces in the UK and Europe. What exactly should be my relationship to non-Muslims? How can I engage in meaningful interfaith dialogue about how we should all be getting along in a time where Islamophobia is becoming more acceptable across Europe, with, for example, Austria, Switzerland, France, and Germany enacting or attempting to enact legislation limiting the expression of public Muslim religious identity? How can we deal with interfaith dialogue in this post-9/11 context so that we as Muslims can also examine for ourselves how we have been deeply affected by a performative way of being? And how can we move forward meaningfully when it comes to engagement between different communities? These were just some of the questions that appeared in my mind and I'm still asking now. One comment that I do want to make is that whether or not we are religious or practicing, and however we decide to define ourselves as diaspora Muslims, Islam plays a role in how a lot of us identify ourselves. With this inevitably comes a performative aspect of how we carry ourselves in European societies, including in the UK. This is especially true when we consider the role Islamophobia plays in media coverage on Muslims, in political discussions about Muslims and policies towards Muslim communities, including those relating to security and integration. Muslims find different ways to relate to their faith in the public space or in non-Muslim societies. For me, there have always been interesting questions on how to apply different aspects of Islamic practice to real-life situations. Being raised in London still gave me a sense of belonging and understanding alongside some other Muslims. However, as I look today to the UK and continental Europe, I see unfortunate examples of Muslims being shamed into limiting their public expression of Islamic identity, particularly in the guise of secularism rhetoric. At times, for example, in France and Belgium, where I'm currently situated, women in hijabs find it hard to be hired and sometimes face problems graduating from universities. Muslim men and women are racialized as particularly threatening subjects, and legislation is being discussed in France to limit women under 18 from wearing the hijab. This comes together with Muslims being essentialized as problematic communities prone to radicalization and extremism. Such essentializing only serves to make problems like radicalization and extremism foreign problems, and doesn't see them as problems that are also rooted in the society and context that we're living in right now, and the structural problems that often make them worse. The forming of Muslim self-identities in such hostile contexts cannot be separated from policies and attitudes towards Muslims. In addition to all of this, and alongside everyone else, also pushed to prize above everything, sometimes even to the detriment of our own mental and physical health. Many of us who are fasting today will be witnesses to this, as we find ourselves having to achieve the same targets and rates of production with a limited amount of energy and capacity. Ramadan burnout is a real thing, and we should be talking about it if we have the energy to do so. Imposter syndrome is also a real problem, as some of us find ourselves questioning our own abilities and talents as we attempt to fit ourselves excruciatingly into the larger systems of productivity. This can and does affect our spiritual well-being too, as time for prayer, self-reflection, and self-care becomes very limited. So, to conclude, for many of us, we have to deal with Islamophobia, structural forms of racism, overproductivity, spiritual dampening, and burnout. For those who are at odds with aspects of their Muslim communal life, this can be even harder to deal with. I hope we take some time and energy, little as we have them, to open up to each other really feeling and how we are really being affected, and also how we can deal with our problems together as Muslims and as allies. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Zayn. Absolutely fantastic. It's been great to hear from all of you, from Rachel, from Jonathan, and from yourself, of course, Zayn. What I'm going to do is just first of all unmute you, Jane and Jonathan, so we can have some dialogue and some conversation. So Rachel, starting off with your Parliamentals programme, yeah, really, really exciting. What sort of caused you to, or what led you to create this programme, and also what sort of projects have your students worked on in the Parliamentals programme? And you spoke about they've had impact, so we'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Actually, if it'd be possible actually to shift it to someone else on my team who's in this call, either Jess or Siobhan, if either of you would, because I'm actually pretty new to the Parliamentors team.
Okay, so so whilst we get on, who are we waiting to?
Either Jess or Siobhan.
Okay, Jess or Siobhan, if you could message myself.
Yeah, Jessica Hazrati there.
So we can unmute you if you want to. So whilst we do that, we'll move on to the next question. What has surprised you most when dealing with people of different faiths, when they meet other people of different faiths for the first time? You know, there must be so many preconceptions there and misconceptions there. So, or maybe none. So what surprised you most? That's to all of you, because you all work at the Faith and Belief Forum. So shall we have you, Jonathan?
I think if you talk about kind of misconceptions, and I come from a faith where people often misconstrued that we still practice polygamy, which was a practice that was part of the early church, but we haven't practiced for 150, 160 years. And I'm sure that there are other faiths that deal with those kind of misconceptions. And so I feel like I often have to help people to get back to the core of my faith and my religion, which isn't those strange doctrines that people might find in different places. And the core of it is a belief in Jesus Christ and being a good person, and caring for others and looking out for others. So I think that's kind of really key, to make sure that we bring people back to our commonality and what makes us good, rather than looking for the weird differences that we might have.
Absolutely. And when you do find people sort of interacting for the first time with people from a different faith to them, Zayn, I'll be coming on to your work as well shortly. What experiences have you had, or yourself, Rachel? Is it anything they're embracing, or they're looking forward to embracing, or is there like a degree of reluctance there? What sort of challenges do you face? And I've also heard from Jessica, so we'll go over to her afterwards.
Sorry, who's being asked, me or Rachel?
Oh, should we go?
Okay, so I don't mind mentioning some things. I mean, obviously, when I was talking, I mentioned a lot of kind of how Muslims are treated in a lot of ways, and that also comes from a lot of misconceptions when it's not like a top-down mistreatment. But also, interestingly, as a teacher at a Jewish Sunday school, and me telling non-Jews about the work that I do, they often assume I'm an expert in Judaism. I mean, I always try to get rid of some misconceptions as best as possible, but I also remind them that I'm in that space as a non-Jew as well. So that's also very interesting. And some people really have strange ideas, as they do about Muslims, about Jews as well. Really, it's interesting to kind of see how they react when you tell them something different.
Actually, that really links really nicely to the question I had ready for you anyway. So, what challenges have you faced as a Muslim willing to immerse yourself in interfaith work and learning Hebrew and working at Jewish Sunday school, from both Muslim, Jewish, or maybe other faith communities?
So, it can be quite challenging in the sense that when you enter a space, and this is why I mentioned performativity quite a lot in what I'm saying, people assume that you will think in a certain way, or that you will have a certain way of thinking, and when you show them that you have maybe a lot more nuance, or that you don't agree with them on everything, they can be quite surprised sometimes. So I found this working within Jewish spaces, and also within relaying my work back to Muslim spaces and talking to my Muslim friends and people that I know about my work in the synagogue. So and also I feel like some people are surprised that I'm a religious Muslim. I think that's also something that I have to explain from time to time. Anti-Semitism and Islamophobia do come up, often unintentionally. And I also feel that as a Muslim who is working within Jewish spaces, sometimes I felt a little bit tokenized. And sometimes I would appreciate that wherever people are, that they're appreciated for the complexity of their views and the context from which they're coming from, whoever they are. So that's also another challenge I've had. From other challenges, of course. There's lots of other things I can talk about, but I'm talking about my experiences here in the UK, and yeah.
Have you faced any challenges from the Muslim community? You've spoken about anti-Semitism, and you've also spoken about Islamophobia and being sort of seen as perhaps clinical of knowledge when you're still learning. Have you faced any opposition from people of your faith?
I have to say very limited. I think to be honest, less than you might think. There not so much hostility as much as there is curiosity, and some people just laugh in your face. So because for them it's quite funny, or they're not used to the concept, or but more than anything, the questions. about me, about where I stand on different things, on issues, about what I exactly do in the synagogue, about how the synagogue views me as a Muslim, you know, these sorts of things as well. You know, not much opposition, to be honest.
Yeah, I get exactly where you're coming from. I often work in areas where I might be the only Muslim that person has ever met, and I always think of myself, you know, as being a representative for my faith as well, and to make sure. I mean, I believe all faith is important, and interfaith dialogue is so important. And you know, a key tenet of my faith is to respect everyone else's faith and acknowledge them. You know, we're still, you know, all praying to one God, as it were. So that actually, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, Zayn. We're going to come back to you shortly. Now we have a question from Jonathan that was posted in the chat, so we're going to come to that shortly. Also, we'd love to hear from everyone. Do keep posting your questions in the chat box so we can ask them to Jonathan and Rachel and Zayn. And we have Jessica, I believe, who I'm just going to try and find and unmute. Here you are, Jessica.
Hi, yeah, hi. I think there was a question about the Parliamentors programme.
Yeah, so the question was about what sort of projects that you've worked on and on the Parliamentors programme and the that they've had, and you know, how can, you know, students even now, and any students who, you know, joining us today, how can they get involved?
Yes, yeah. So the Parliamentors programme, it's quite unique, I would say. It's an interfaith programme, but there's also other elements. So social action is a key feature of the project, and also mentoring by a local MP. And the aim is we bring together 5 students from 10 universities across the UK, from Manchester. We've got 2 in London, some in Coventry and Birmingham. And the 5 students come together to think about local issues in their communities, but also on campus, and how they can respond to that and work together. And I guess through that, they develop interfaith skills, and the teams are made up from people from different faiths. So sometimes the interfaith aspect isn't the kind of core reason why people get involved. They might be interested in political leadership or social action, but interfaith is there built into the project as well, which is really nice. And I think that's really important to engage young people in interfaith. I think quite often it's quite hard to engage young people. And some of my favourite projects that I've seen across them, SOAS University did a project where they linked law students with newly arrived refugees, and had a kind of they linked them for advice around legal, so they had a drop-in centre basically for people, and that was really successful, and the university actually took it on as part of their law course that they offered to students. And another fun one from Coventry University was they built a community garden in a local estate. So students went out into a local area of Coventry and they made an allotment community garden. And then they got their MP, I remember it was Chris Cotton MP, and he was like planting potatoes, and they did a whole kind of social media campaign around that, which was really fun. So yeah, lots of creative ideas, and yeah, friendships that have lasted for the 10 years that it's been going on, which is really great.
That's fantastic, planting potatoes. That's great. And because you're right, the more we work together, you know, having a common focus creates a touch point for us to unite and to have conversations and learn from each other, most importantly. Jonathan, I'm going to move on to a question that we had for you that was posted in the chat box, which is from Raheem. So your interviewer reacted positively to your missionary experience, but have you ever received any more skeptical or negative responses, and how do you respond to them? And I'd also be quite interested to hear from Rachel as well, because I haven't heard much from you on the same question. So first of all, you, Jonathan.
It's a great question. I think I think being a white British man in the UK, I can kind of hide my religion, I think, if I wanted to, if that makes sense. People don't necessarily assume I'm religious because of the way I look. And I think that isn't true for everybody. And therefore, I I feel like I don't have to explain myself as much as I feel like other people who people might perceive to be religious just because of the way they look, which is not necessarily true. But I haven't had those kind of same interactions. But I definitely, there was a time where a colleague of mine had gone to see the Book of Mormon musical, and was asking me quite inappropriate questions about elements of the show, and that were very personal to me and were very kind of disparaging about people that I have great respect for, so prophets or other people that are portrayed in the show. But I think in general, people might ask those questions not realizing the disrespect that it is causing, and that if you explain to them, hold on a second, you're asking me about something that's highly personal. In this case, it was religious clothing that I wear that is underneath my main clothing, and I just pointed out to my colleague, hang on a second, you're asking me about my personal clothing here, and that's not necessarily appropriate in a workplace. And so I think if our default reaction is that people don't and aren't looking to be negative, then I think you can normally talk people down. And certainly that's been my experience. I've been blessed not to have experiences where people have been really negative towards my religion.
Thank you, Jonathan, for sharing your experience. And Rachel, how about yourself?
Yeah, in terms of if I've gotten negative reactions from, let's say, my community or doing this kind of work, I would say in terms of being involved in a lot of interfaith work, I don't get negative responses from the Jewish community as much as I get people just being kind of shocked or scared on my behalf. The most common thing that I'll hear is people saying, oh, do they know that you're Jewish? Like, do you change your name on the Zoom calls so that you can like hide your identity? Or what kinds of, like, everyone, just a lot of people from my community just think that the world is kind of out to get them. So then it's sort of like I'm throwing myself into an unsafe space. And that's actually why it's just incredibly like wonderful and gratifying when I can come back and say, no, it's great. People are so curious to learn about my background. I get a lot of people talking about, wow, you do that in your community, we do something similar, or tell me more. So as Jonathan was saying, I think by and large, most of the experiences and most people who are doing this work are really coming from a good place. And that's actually just, it's been, really, really, because having been brought up in that community, those were my assumptions as well, that it's a dangerous thing to leave the community. And every time that I'm disproven, and then I get to tell my community that it's actually not as scary as we think it is sometimes, that's a really positive thing.
And from a work point of view, so Johnson was saying, expressing his work to his faith to an interviewer, have you ever faced any challenges from a work point of view? And if so, how did you overcome that? And, what can we do to overcome that bias based on, somebody's name and as an expression of their religious identity?
I'm very happy to say that I don't experience any discrimination in the workplace. It'd be very unfortunate considering that I work at an interfaith charity. But in the past,
obviously, not with you also.
No. In the past, I would say, it's mostly that a lot of people, the second that I say that I'm Jewish, a lot of people, or even if I don't say it and they can see from my name, just have animosity towards me on the basis of assumptions about my political beliefs about Israel-Palestine, which is a very difficult thing to kind of get past with a lot of people. You have to make a lot of disclaimers about what you do or do not believe before being able to be accepted as who you are, I think.
Yeah.
So I've definitely experienced that.
Yeah, justifying yourself to the views of the media and saying, that doesn't reflect, your faith at all.
Yeah, exactly. That I'm not the Israeli government.
I hear you on that one. It's sad that people do have, all these misconceptions when it does come to faith. And we're moving on. We've got some other questions. We've got a couple for you, Zayn. So maybe you can, actually the first one is for you alone, and the next one we can open it up. So Rhiannon asks, can you tell me more about your work with Quaker Peace and Social Witness, please?
Yeah, there we are. I'm unmuting myself. Thanks, Rhiannon, for your question. For me, the Quaker experience was quite formative because it gave me a real headway into the work that I'm doing now. And so thanks to the Quakers for that experience. I was placed by Quaker Society of Friends to work with nuclear disarmament think tank, British American Security Information Council, and to help them with their work in nuclear disarmament and working on also a weapons of mass destruction disarmament project that they're working on in the Middle East, as well, or at least they've been involved in the past, and that also involves talking about nuclear weapons in the Middle East as well, and yes, so that was a really good experience for me in a lot of ways because it made me really think about what I want to do independently, and also made me, because I was coming from an interfaith background, what I was doing outside of university was mostly interfaith work, and I wanted to experience something different, and I realized actually a lot of things are also similar. Interfaith skills are also needed when it comes to higher level dialogue and understanding even more complex security problems today as well. So that's something which I don't think a lot of people understand. And I'm really glad that I was able to have that understanding through the work. So yeah, that's a little bit about what I do in terms of, about my experience in terms of QPSW. Sorry, Ramadan brain is kicking in.
Yeah, I would also love to, one thing you did mention was Ramadan burnout, and I know we have fasting across the different faiths, and I've only got 6 minutes left, so I'm torn for time because I have like so many questions for you guys. But I think if let's go to Ramadan and Ramadan burnout, or fasting burnout. So just how your experiences of that are, because we live in a society also where faith is portrayed in certain ways. And yeah, I'd be intrigued to hear from you, Zayn, and also from you, Rachel and Jonathan, and maybe just a brief comment from all of you, please. Hold on, Zayn.
I've gotten the permission to unmute. Okay, so Ramadan burnout for me is a real thing. And I'm not in the UK at the moment, but I'm in Belgium, so I'm within continental Europe, where the discussions around faith are different, around Islam are different, also laced with a lot of Islamophobia, but also there is just this general pressure of secularity within the public space, laicite, not mixing religion and public space too much. In Belgium, it's not as big of an issue as it is in France, and so having the discussion with your employer or with somebody in the workplace about how Ramadan can be a difficult time in terms of achieving usual production targets is a difficult conversation to have, not just because you're a little bit ashamed to talk about how you might not be as productive as usual, but because Islam is there as part of that conversation. So yeah, I mean, maybe possibly if I were in London, it would have been easier. I am finding that as the more I talk about it, the more people are listening over here as well. But generally speaking, I would say there is that pressure for Muslims to hush. I mean, I can always assert myself as someone who's also British Muslim and say, look, this is what I'm used to. But not everybody has different experiences, and their workplaces are different here. So it's very important. One thing I'll mention before we go on, whoever you're working with has to have different experiences, and just because your Muslim colleagues are not talking to you about whatever Islamophobia they're going through, what their manager has told them, whatever they're experiencing, doesn't mean they're not experiencing it. It just means that they're in an environment where they're too worried to talk about these things, and that doesn't just go for Muslims, of course.
Thank you.
And if I can kind of Zayn and I met a couple of days ago in preparation for this event, and he was talking about Ramadan burnout, and it's something that I had just never considered, and I'm kind of ashamed to think that actually. As a religion, we fast once a month on a Sunday, the first Sunday of every month for a 24-hour period. And that is in no way the same as Ramadan when you're doing it for such a prolonged period of time. But as I heard Zayn talking about Ramadan burnout, I thought, well, I know what it feels like to go one day a month without food and how cranky and how that affects me physically. And I need to have more empathy for my Muslim colleagues, which I didn't realize I could relate to until somebody shared that with me. And I'm so grateful for Zayn for speaking up and having that dialogue.
Thank you, Jonathan. And Rachel, what about yourself? And also, just as a final wrap up, after you've asked the question, Rachel, just a final reflection and on how we can make faith and interfaith dialogue just more accessible, how we can get the conversation going, get the conversation moving, and get everyone engaged. So, and then I'll open that up to Zayn and Jonathan, and then I'm going to unmute you now in advance. Right.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I guess my answer to both of the questions is kind of similar, which is that I honestly hadn't really thought about all of the different times in university or even at work that especially in university, where I had exams due on Yom Kippur or like in the middle of holidays where I really needed to be in synagogue. And I just always, or where I was doing a program and like they were very not accommodating at all when I was trying to keep Passover. And they sort of made me feel like I was being very picky. And so I really felt like I was being very picky and that it was like me just being, making everyone else's lives harder. And it was it's actually, yeah, just in the last 20 minutes, I've been like, oh, you know what, like, wouldn't it have been nice if I didn't feel that it was like I was imposing on everyone else. So I guess the beginning thing is having these kinds of conversations and realizing that it's not an imposition and that other people experience similar things. And yeah, so I'm really grateful for this opportunity, and it's definitely made me feel more comfortable also reflecting on how my own faith, how I would like to feel more comfortable and free practicing it, and most of all, how I'd like other people to feel more free and comfortable practicing their faiths. So thank you.
Rachel, over to you, Jonathan.
Again, being able to share my faith in interfaith spaces and non-secular spaces, I've always found actually been such a positive thing. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to share with you all tonight, and just grateful to be in an environment that I wouldn't normally get to be in. And I feel like I learned so much from all of you. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And finally, over to you, Zayn, and then we'll have a moment of pause and then go to Aval at 8:33.
Yeah, so thank you for this opportunity as well to speak about my experiences, and also for me to talk about Islamophobia and to talk about these issues that really matter to me and to a lot of us as Muslims as well, including Ramadan burnout, structural racism, these kinds of issues that are really important to bring to the fore, especially in interfaith dialogue spaces where sometimes these things can get pushed to the background. So, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much to our speakers today. We're now going to go to Aval. So, and we'll join you at the other end for a final thanks.
اللهم إني لك صمت وبك آمنت وعلى رزقك أفطرت ذهب الظمأ وابتلت العروق وثبت الأجر إن شاء الله.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
اللهم رب هذه الدعوة التامة والصلاة القائمة آت محمدا الوسيلة والفضيلة وابعثه مقاما محمودا الذي وعدته إنك لا تخلف الميعاد.
I would say thank you so much everyone for joining us today. I would love to give a big thank you to our speakers today from the Faith and Belief Forum. We've had Jonathan Mace, Rachel Cohen and Zayn sharing their stories in this very inspiring event, and it's been a pleasure for all the audience who have joined us today. And I just would like to say a big thank you once again to Islam Channel, our media partner for this year, and also to the Arts Council UK for making this event possible. You can read more about how we are fighting world hunger with Islamic Relief at iruk.co/RTP. Ramadan is a month of charity and giving, and we'd love to please encourage you to support our initiative this Ramadan and to support the Ramadan project so that we can continue our work. Your support is vital to keeping us going as the world transitions to normality and to keeping events going such as our open iftars and our sunnah fasts and our other events. You can donate on our website at ramadantentproject.com or on our launch good at launchgood.com/RTP 2021. And just thank you once again. And we're here every night during Ramadan. We only have a few months of Ramadan, a few days even of Ramadan left, and to make them the most of, and join us every day for the remainder of the month. And Assalamu alaikum from me. Thank you so much to our guests, and we'll see you inshallah tomorrow. Bye-bye.